there anyone here this is the first time? But you've been to a Hare Krishna center before?
No, sir.
Ah.
This is our very first time.
And where do you reside?
We live in Pearl Road, my husband and I.
I see. And how did you hear about this?
Patricia.
Ah.
We're the grandparents.
Adopted granddaughter.
Yeah, our adopted granddaughter, and we're the grandparents to the baby.
I see.
Great grandparents, I should say.
I see. Well, that's nice.
And she invited us, and we're very thankful and welcome that they let us come.
We're very happy that you're here.
I see that.
Anyone else this first time? No. Mostly old timers. Just for those who are old timers or even new timers, this is the proper way to put the chord for this. This is we call it kartala. It's symbols, hand symbols. But this is the proper way so that you can properly hold it. Many times now we hear people playing these and clanging it. Someone was telling me about attending some program someplace and they had to leave because the instruments were so harsh.
Well, we're very open-minded and we're very looking forward to it.
Krishna
Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Gaur Brahmananda. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Guru. From earth comes sound. Isn't it? Are we hearing these sounds? Where is that sound coming from? No. That sound.
Oh, the chime.
Yeah. So how is that sound being produced?
Vibration.
No.
By
Wind.
The wind is moving, but the earthy elements, they're hitting together.
Metal and wood.
Metal, wood, they're hitting together. So hidden within that wood or that metal is sound. You see? Just like hidden within a log is fire. So this Krishna consciousness movement begins at the point where most spiritual practices, religious practices end up. The end of most, in terms of the ordinary perspective on it, the end of most religious pursuits is to become free from the rebirth, and according to the particular religion is to become connected with God. The end of most spiritual pursuits is to become liberated. People talk about, say, in Buddhism and Nirvana. Unfortunately, most of the yoga practices that are current, they don't even delve or touch upon that very much these days. Mostly it's something mechanical to help you feel better, to help you be more healthy, more attentive, to be relieved of stress, to be relieved of anxiety. This is the Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is the spiritual handbook of this Krishna consciousness movement, the Bhagavad Gita, this book that I have here. Who here has read this book cover to cover? Nice. So, there are some 700 verses, and these verses are spoken in a very simple language by Krishna to Arjuna. And the very beginning of this discussion of Bhagavad Gita is bringing a focus that these talks are begun at the point of what we call liberation. So liberation, can someone offer me an idea of what is liberation? In one or two words? Liberation.
Freedom from misery.
Oh, that is possibly an effect of liberation. That it is one of the causes that people knowingly or unknowingly seek liberation. Krishna says, Chaturvedi bhajanti mam, that there are 4 kinds of persons who approach God. And one of the persons is those who are suffering. So many people, a large percentage of people who approach spiritual life directly or indirectly, even in this so-called yoga, it's not actually yoga that people taught at the gym, it's not at all yoga. But it is some mechanical process, and people go there to lessen their anxieties and their sufferings. So that is a cause, motivation, and that's something that people are looking for liberation. That is something they're looking for. Someone else? What is liberation? What is the
from fleshly desires.
Yes, that is actually intrinsic in liberation.
Free from the modes of material nature.
Yes, but that's a little complicated for our guests. Yes, but free from the activity, free from the influence of the material world.
Society and whole.
Yeah. Well,
Non-dual.
Non-dual. So these are all close. the beginning of Yesham Tvantakadam Papam Jananam Punyakarmanante Dvandoha Nirmam Mukta Vajanti Mambrida. So the first evolution, the first manifestation, the first unfolding symptom of liberation is that, this is all hinted on, that one realizes, at least tentatively, but more firmly, that they are not this material body. But the other side of that is, as this realization unfolds and becomes very clear, is that one will realize what they are. It's not enough to realize that we're not our material body, or to realize the things that are entangling us, like lust, anger, greed. But what is essential is to realize what we actually are. So one thing is to realize what I'm not. In Sanskrit, the word is aham ka. I am this body, this material interaction. I am the activities and the modes of material nature. Like currently, at least the ones who we are apparently talking to in this room in the human form, and in this English language. So we have an identity as a human being. But according to the Vedic understanding, is that we are actually aham brahmasmi. I am the soul. So sometimes, like I might be wearing a shirt like this, and you're wearing a shirt like that, and this Mataji is wearing some other attire. And we put on one thing, and then after some time, maybe even the same day, we take it off, and we're constantly changing this attire. But we don't think, well, I'm this attire. We don't think that I'm this attire. And we don't, we have to evolve where we understand that we are not this body. In this life, we're a human being, and some of us are from India, and some of us are from America or some other countries. And we identify with that country, we identify because we were born in that country, or we're born of parents of that country. So we're having these identifications, all of which are temporary. It's called asat, temporary, that which is not true. Temporary in Sanskrit is asat. Sat means true. Sat means eternal. That which is eternal, we consider that true. And the opposite is asat, that which is not permanent, not truth, not wisdom, not the absolute, that is asat, that is temporary. So I'm not this body. To understand that, to begin to apply that, and by guidance and direction of a person who is on the Sat platform, a person who exists on the Sat platform, the eternal platform, and experiences things on the eternal platform, which is called aham brahmasmi. I am the spiritual nature. I am of the spiritual nature. Asmi is the case ending, meaning I. Aham, meaning I. And the verb is brahmasmi. I am the spirit within this body. So, this is the actually hallmark, and the very cornerstone, the very first unfolding of the point of liberation. And that it is not the end of liberation, although that point always remains there. Liberation means that it exists on the first platform of Asat. on the platform Sat, free from Asat. The platform of eternality, of knowledge, of awareness. And the unfolding of that next comes as Chit. So Chit is the consciousness, the Chaitana within ourself. So if we were to say, what is the real difference between something that has a life and something that does not have life, like those chimes. We can go back to that first point. So the chimes are making some sound, correct? And the sound is contained within the chime itself, and when they hit each other, they vibrate. So consciousness is within me, and the nature of that consciousness is eternal. And the consciousness eternal is the foundation of that which is life. And that which has no life, like these chimes, they're making sound, but there is no life, there's no consciousness. And next door there is like these ponds, and then at a certain time of the year, they produce quite a racket. There are many frogs, and they go rom, 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 rom. So they are making sound, but the difference between the chime and the frog is that one has life, and as soon as the life leaves the frog, then it becomes no different than the chime. There's no more sound from that frog, just as if there's no wind, there's no sound from the chime. So the first feature of liberation is to understand that I'm not this body, I'm eternal. And the second feature is what is the nature of that eternality is consciousness, awareness. So in the material awareness, because we're dealing with something that is temporary, something that is being destroyed as we go about life, one of the main functions of sleep is what? What is, can someone say? What is the main function of sleep?
Self-healing?
Yes. More descriptively, self-healing means?
Restoring?
Yes, restoring, repairing, rebuilding. Just as, I don't want to get into a technical discussion, since I'm talking perhaps maybe 600 billion or 1 trillion cells in our body have gone away. So they go away quite quickly, and during the day there is a certain amount of rebuilding, but you know, because you're active, the rebuilding is not at its finest. So the body is required, because of the way that we are in this body, the modes within which we're using this body, it's required that we completely rest the body. And that state, the body is not destroying itself so much, and we have a better chance that the body will be mostly rebuilt, especially after a certain age of life. It's a gradually degrading process. So the soul is eternal, and to have happiness from something that is not eternal, to have happiness from something that is not conscious, this is not a good fit. This is not a good probability. Just like many of us, or most of us, we have experience of someone we know, some relative, and they died, and then we see their dead body. And many people, most people, they'll be very sad, they'll be crying. And but why are they crying? You see, that same body is there. My father, he had a body up to the moment that he died. You know, he was my father, and I wasn't crying. But as soon as my father died, then I was so sad that, and what happened? My father is gone. The body is there, but the moment the soul leaves the body, then intuitively, even if a person is not spiritual or religious in any way, or not philosophical in any way, intuitively we'll say he's gone. And no sane person would want to take that body, and of course they make movies of this and there are novels of this, and sometimes there are people like this. They take that body and they stuff it up and they mummify it and they sit it in a chair and they say, no, I want to keep him forever. But this is the mark of insanity. This is the mark of insanity, to try to enjoy happiness with the dead body of someone who, up to the point of death, was near and dear to us. But the moment that they're not near and dear to us, the moment that they're dead, we're going to stuff them in the ground or burn them, or the Parsis, they take the body out and they let the animals eat the flesh off, and then they take the bones and burn it and make it into some fertilizer. So that would be the height of insanity and cruelty. If I took someone who is not even near and dear to me, or someone who is dear, and I say, come to my house, I want to bury you so that I can keep you forever with me. Or come to my house and I'm going to burn your body so that you can always be with me forever. People talk about they're dead, but they'll be with us forever. So we don't do that type of thing, because intuitively it is our instinct to understand that we are the soul within this body. So the first nature, the first aspect, the first unfolding, the first aspect of the spiritual, the Brahma, is that it is eternal. And the second aspect is that it is chit, it is conscious, it is aware, it understands the difference between life, living, and dead. So we understand intuitively the difference, but we don't have a clear understanding. And the third is, what is the third manifestation, the third aspect of the eternality of the soul?
Of pleasure.
Pleasure. And in Sanskrit that is called Ananda. Sat, Chit, Ananda. So this is the definition, a very clear, succinct, but actually sublime and comprehensive definition of the three aspects of being liberated. But the cornerstone is to become free from the identity of the material body. But to do that properly, then one has to act in a way that is different than that of the material body. Just like a person is in prison. And why are they basic, other than the mistakes of imperfect justice? Because man is imperfect, and therefore their application, even if we had laws of justice that were perfect, the application of justice is imperfect. So, other than the imperfect application of justice, why is a person in prison? Someone?
We did something wrong.
They did something wrong. They did something.
We made a bad decision.
They made a bad decision and acted in a way that was injurious to others. I mean, because basically the modern law is based on a social contract in which we're harming someone else. So, a little distracting. The principle is that we are suffering because we have made a bad decision out of ignorance, of foolishness, whatever you want to call it. Greed is from foolishness. We made a bad decision and we acted on that bad decision somehow or other, whichever way it came out, and then we're facing the repercussions of that. So, other than the technicality of how long is the prison sentence, the idea of being in a prison is what? What is the idea of the prison itself? What is the healthy prisons supposed to
Retaining
be?
the actions of the person?
Yes, exactly. Means they call it the Department of Corrections. That is the Department of Corrections. Recently there's a podcast that was started in Sing Sing. And it's quite interesting because they take persons who have been victims and they bring them in the presence of the perpetrators, not necessarily of that specific crime, but they take the persons who are incarcerated and they let them hear the other side of the repercussions of their actions. So one person was talking that even if I steal $1 from someone, $1 is not the significance, it's the injury that person will be in anxiety. So the principle of getting out of the prison should be what? The purpose of the prison is Department of Corrections.
To change one.
Yes, to change one from?
A criminal mentality to a good mentality.
Yes, an erroneous mentality, which is criminal, to a healthy mentality. So this is the requirement. This is the requirement. So chit is to become aware of what I should do and what I shouldn't be doing. So liberation means not just to theoretically or primarily or have a moment of understanding I'm not this body, but since it's just the very beginning, the actual process of liberation is understanding, learning, and applying under the direction of someone who is free from the modes of nature, free from the bodily concept, and who is established in Satchitananda how to act according to Satchitananda. Just like a person in prison has to be guided by someone who is free, relative, of course, this is relative improvement, free from bad action, right? You see, you can't have a whole bunch of criminals associating with each other and expect that they're going to become good personalities. Is it? Is it the nature, you see? Like you can't take 5 drunkards and put them together and expect them to become sober. You take 1 drunkard with 4 sober persons, and what's the likelihood that will happen? Yeah, you'll have 5 drunk people. You know, it will pass on, you see. It will pass on. So the inverse is the particular to focus on. The inverse is that a person who is free from this duality, someone said duality, and free from lust, anger, and greed, which are manifestations of the ignorance within the modes of nature, that person will give the contact. You see, that contact. You see, materially, we become affected by the material type of concept. They say birds of a feather flock together. You know a person by the association they keep. You see. In the Vedic system, we know a person according to what their modes of nature, what their spiritual inclination or lack of spiritual inclination is by what they eat. You see. There are a few little things. This is discussed in the 14th chapter and the 17th chapter of the Gita. Just a few little things you can immediately notice and you can understand what side towards liberation, or the word in English is bondage or bandha in Sanskrit. What side they're on. What tendency they have more of or what tendency they have less of. So the principle is first sat, chit, and as our dear friend Yogendra Vandana Prabhu said, what was the English word you used?
Pleasure.
Pleasure. And in Sanskrit, ananda, happiness. So material happiness is always, what is the first characteristic of material happiness?
Temporary.
Temporary. But actually, and I've spoken on this before, and I'll just again briefly repeated. Technically there is no material happiness, or very, very scant. If you think of it, where is there any pure material happiness? If we look at material happiness objectively in ourselves, from our own particular experience, or we watch other people, we'll see that almost invariably every situation of material happiness comes in response to the alleviation of some situation of suffering. It was mentioned that liberation is part of wanting to get free of suffering, of difficulties. So, like hunger.
Right, no food and having food.
Yes. So, when we eat, our eating pleasure or happiness or satisfaction comes in basic proportion to our hunger. Of course, if you're way too hungry, it's very difficult to eat. If you're exceedingly hungry, you have to be very careful. But with normal hunger, you eat something and then you feel satisfaction. But sometimes we're traveling and we can't get something to eat, and I had the experience of eating something. I was traveling, I ate it, and it was really
It wasn't as good as you thought it was.
worse than that. And then all of a sudden, I find something that's really, but then, there's no more hunger. So you can't enjoy it, Tough luck. Or sometimes, I remember traveling in India and going from Bihar to Bengal, and what is that station? First station on the Patna line? If you're coming from north. Berhampur? You remember? You don't remember. Mudi. So in Bengal, there's a food, is puffed rice, and they call it mudi, and they have a can. So I was really thirsty, traveling, and then you come, with a thing, it's like 7-Up, it's called limca, and I was just thirsty. But these fellows, they're so expert. In Hindi, it's called nakali, means, it's not the real thing. I don't know how to express it in English.
It's fake.
Some of the words can't translate. Nakali, it's like, so the guy popped off the cover, and then it was so disgusting, so disgusting, I couldn't drink it, you see. But if I had somehow or other drunk it and someone came with the real thing, you can't drink it, it's already spoiled. So we get a moment to enjoy, and then it's gone. Everything, if you think of any type of material happiness, it's actually mostly, almost invariably in proportion to how much there is some sort of distress. See? So that is, how can we take second best, or third best, or fifth best? So the Krishna consciousness movement is really meant for intelligent people. People who don't want second best, and certainly people who don't want fifth best, and not 10th best, or last best. But people who are searching for the very best. Happiness, which is not in relationship to a material situation. And then happiness which, we especially see children like this, that they have a kind of buoyancy, a natural effervescence, a natural happiness, because they're not so much entangled with the difficulties of material nature, but they're always coming and going, and their happiness is temporary also. You can't get misled. But we want that type of happiness that not only is always there, reliable, unconditional happiness, but that kind of happiness that wants us always to jump for joy. Everything is so amazing. Spiritual happiness is Satchit Ananda. It is a happiness that continues to unfold. It is the happiness that is incomparable. And the wonderful thing about this movement, which is called the Hare Krishna movement, is Hare Krishna. Our Guru Maharaj, whenever he'd meet someone, he would say, Hare Krishna. Everyone. I listened to him, say, 3-4 hours a day. I lived with him on and off for 6.5 years. He lived with me for 77 days, 78 days, and I lived with him another 320 days or something like that. And every person he would see, when he'd meet them, he would say,
Hare Krishna.
And when they were departing, he would say,
Hare Krishna.
Keep with that one. Just a little hint here. Because immediately, Hare Krishna, that is the Satchitananda platform. That is the Satchitananda platform. But just like in the beginning, if there's no wind and no movement, we can't hear that sound within, you see, that chime. So it takes a little motion. So within the body is our soul. Many people say, I have a soul, that's a misnomer. I don't have a soul, I am the soul. One is to think I am this body, and then within this body, I go inside, I go deep, and then within this body, in this region actually, is where the soul is located, in the middle of the 7 chakras, is giving... the soul plex, yes. The solar plex, yes. Near the solar plex, actually residing in the region of the heart area, and causing the heart to be able to do all the wonderful things, you see. Like a miracle of the heart is that it's able to take in oxygen, and that oxygen is melded to the red blood cells. And then within 20 seconds, those red blood cells are pushed 30,000 miles within this body. There are 30,000 miles approximately of blood cells. And every single cell, mostly, is nourished with oxygen within every 20 seconds. Quite amazing. And as soon as the soul leaves, then the oxygen can no longer be melded to those red blood cells. That is the proof of life. That is the action. Not the only action, but the primary action of the soul keeping that body alive. That prana is infused throughout the body, taking the oxygen and merging it, melding it, fixing it to the red blood cell, and when the red blood cell passes through, then the nature of the oxygen energizes the cells. It's amazing, amazing miracle. Effortlessly created by God. So we chant Hare Krishna, and that evolves, that awakens, that enables the soul within. It is the vibration of the soul, although we are doing it with our vocal cords. When I say Krishna, it's not precisely the material body articulating, but it is actually the very soul within this body, my very self, the soul, that is vibrating this mantra. So, in a course of time, then this consciousness that was a prisoner's consciousness becomes transformed, and in the association of others who are doing it, this process can become perfected. So, thank you all for coming. Chant Hare Krishna, and all of our lives will be sublime. Any questions? Hare Krishna. You can say that again.
Hare Krishna.
You can take that to your bank account. Yes.
Oftentimes, they describe animals as having instinct, or they know when to fly here, or if it's a bird, or so on and so forth. Can you describe the Vedic concept of that?
Yes, the Dhammi Bhuti, Krishna says, Hridesho Sanivishta. So this means that Krishna explains that he is in the heart, and He's directing the wandering of all the living beings. Mata Smita Jnana Mohanacha. Hridaya Sanavishta, that He is in the heart. Just like we are in the soul plex next to the heart. The soul is unperplexed. Well, actually, in this material body we're perplexed, soul perplexed, but then we want to become unperplexed. So, but how is the soul doing this? You see, how is the soul doing this? We can begin to notice it indirectly in hundreds of different ways. A big example of this in the human form of life is, perhaps we've experienced this, that we're doing something. We might even get in a car, and this is not recommended, but it happens often enough. We get in a car, we take off, say we're going to Jackson, which is 2.5 hours away. And different things strike that, but all of a sudden we're in Jackson, And somehow we didn't have any accident. We might be paying attention to the road, hopefully, always. The cars in front of us, the cars on our side, and the cars behind us, and properly navigating. But you see, we get there somehow or other. You see. Or sometimes we respond to something, even we have hardly a chance to see it. And if we look at all the actions that we do within this material body, it's actually very complex. Very complex. Almost, they call it the involuntary responses, which is the greater part of this life. So, the same thing is there within the animals, that they are getting direction from God to do the various things. Actually, the soul is spiritual, and being spiritual, the soul has an ability greater than matter. You see, when this body dies, you lump on the ground, and although there are many living entities who are within this body, they will continue on, and some things like the hair and nails will continue to grow, and certain things will grow, and all the cells will die, and those who are visitors to the body, living off the body, they'll either die or leave this body. The worms will crawl out, and whatever it is. But the soul is actually always moving this body. And how is it moving this body? Because the movements are very, very complex. Now they're trying to make robots. Or they're trying to make artificial intelligence. They're trying to make, it's been years, and it was my main field actually, but I got, fortunately, diverted. Transformational grammar of this Mr. Noam Chomsky, which actually he never made. So they've been struggling how to make voice synthesis. And even that has been very, very difficult, very, very difficult. They're making some progress. But automatically, a child is learning how to react and to speak. And that's because both there's a soul within the body and there's God guiding that soul. So the same thing for the animals. And in some ways the animals are better than us because they only can act according to their instinct. There's a difficulty in that, is that they can't act more than their instinct. But they have that positive characteristic that they act only toward their instinct. You see, like a child acts according to their instinct. For instance, a human being, they'll eat so many things that they shouldn't eat. A human, an adult human. But the cat or the dog or the child, if they eat something that's bad, they'll immediately vomit. They act according to a healthy instinct. You see? They act according to instinct. They act according to the direction of the Lord, but that is on the lower nature. And now we have to get the direction on a higher nature. And that's why Transcendental Association, persons who are on the path of liberation, persons who are perfected in liberation, and the books that guide us to the path of liberation are very essential. On our own, we'll just go on making the same mistake, winding up in prison again and again, because we're not getting reformed. So does that somewhat answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes.
Prabhu, if the Lord is guiding all of our decisions, all of our wanderings, what's the nature of decisions we make as individuals?
Yes, well, the scope of our decisions is very finite. I'll give you a relative example. Like, if you turn on the TV, there's whether you have, whatever it is, you have cable or you have satellite, you have a finite number of choices. I mean, you can keep on jumping back and forth, and so there's combinations, but we're laid out with a finite number of choices. Scientists also know, and they also describe that there are 5 elements, basic elements in this material world. The scientists begin like that, just as they do with the Greeks and the Romans and the Vedas, that there are 5 basic material elements: earth, fire, water, air, and ether. These are the 5 basic. So there is no 6th element, right? You can't imagine a 6th element. Even if you could imagine, you can't imagine what it would be. I can imagine nothingness, but it's not possible to imagine nothingness. It's not possible. So there's a finite number of choices ahead of us, and many of those choices are already made for us, or very little choice in that, Like a simple choice is you can always drive on the right side or the left side of the road. Some people drive in the middle of the road, but let's leave that aside. But, you can drive on the left, and in certain countries, driving on the left, that's the correct thing to do, and you'll get your best results. And in this country, and most of the countries in the world, driving on the right is the best thing to do, except when you're passing, and then you drive on the left. And driving on the right will overall get you the best results. So we don't have much of a choice of that. I may decide, well, I want to drive like in England, but we will get the repercussions. So this is the laws of material nature. So in ignorance, we have no awareness of laws beyond us, just like a child has no awareness of anything beyond their tongue. If you watch a very small child, people go and they say, oh, my child smiled at me and they loved me. But actually, I remember in psychology, we took a balloon and didn't even have anything on it. We just took a balloon and put it before the child and it smiled. Sometimes they used to put the face, but we didn't put the face. It loves the balloon. It's okay. It's an involuntary response. It's necessary. But there is some consciousness of the child. They can detect their mother. They can smell. But generally, the child is only my tongue. And then it expands to their other senses. And then as a person matures and they become more aware of consciousness and they start to see others, but they see others as separate living entities, but in relationship to themselves, and then gradually they start to see, there's kind of a balance here. And the further evolution within the material frame, which gradually brings us to a spiritual frame, is to see, why don't I think about the other person instead of myself? So they can actually independently think of the other person. What is their well-being? Otherwise we begin selfish. What's my well-being? What's my enjoyment? And the other is kind of a parity, even Stephen. And then the other is, the highest thing within the material frame is to see other people's well-being. There's a Sanskrit saying, Loka samasta sukhano bhavatu sarve jana sukhano. My satisfaction is to see to the well-being of others. So materially, that's the highest. But that is a temporary thing, because I'm just seeing to the well-being of their body. But the higher thing, where it becomes liberation, is to see to the well-being of their soul. Okay? Alright, so there's another
transcendental activity after this. Krishna consciousness is very nice. Our spiritual master used to say, we're eating our way back to Godhead.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Jai
Krishna.
Krishna.